the Venn diagram of your interests and experiences that make you you, coupled with like a really good concept for a show, a tight format that is really unique, and collaborators who you have a genuine relationship with, that's really compelling. Like there is nothing more compelling in art or life than somebody who is uniquely and authentically themselves.
When I closed the membership, I really wanted to thank these members. And so I actually sent them all a tiny little gift just to say, thank you for being a founding member. It wasn't a lot, but I just felt like I wanted to do something because these people have bought into this for me. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled people want to give me money for me to tell them what I know.
Welcome to Creative Independence,
a podcast by Memberful. I'm Jen Matichuk.
And I'm Cy Wilmore. In this podcast, we speak to successful and passionate entrepreneurs who have won big in the creator economy.
We believe that knowing your value increases everyone's satisfaction. When you strongly believe in what you are putting into the world, others will too.
Today, we're joined by Amanda McLaughlin, CEO of Multitude, which is an independent podcast collective and production company based in Brooklyn, New York. Thank you so much for joining us today, Amanda. Hope you're keeping well.
Very well. Thank you for having me.
Amanda started her career on the creator side. Making content herself and putting it online helped her find her community, which developed her love of podcasting.
So I've been a creator my whole life. I was a very early YouTube video blogger. I started blogging in 2007, which is hard to believe. It hasn't always been a part of our lives on the internet. But being a creator was always the thing that I enjoyed coming home from school, college, work to do. And whether it was posting fan fiction, participating in fandom, being on Tumblr, video blogging, or listening to and discussing my favorite podcasts, it was the thing that really brought me kind of escapism and community and comfort when I was going through stressful times. And for me, particularly, using podcasts as a way to get to know other people's points of view, to find community with people who had things in common with me, beginning with even, serious things like mental illness. Podcasting really gave me the vocabulary to do things like ask for help or seek therapy or realize that being on medication is very common, as well as I was negotiating my own identity and coming out as bisexual in my early 20s, finding community with other queer folks online is not a thing that's super easy to access in person, even somewhere like New York City. So podcasting was really a life raft for me. And so when my best friend from kindergarten moved back to New York City and we wanted to start a project together, podcasting felt like the natural way and space for us to talk all about mythology, folklore, our sort of fear of and fascination with death all over cocktails. And that's how my first podcast was born.
Going way back, you've said that you were told you could be the first female president, which feels very different from completely opposite maybe from what you're currently doing. But what do you think inspired that thought that people were saying to you? And did you feel comfortable with that at the time?
I think that's a thing people tell, or at least people told this very kind of nerdy and solo child who liked to read and not particularly talk to other kids. But I think that's the real beauty of online community is you can find people who get it and who are like you, and share things in common, and kind of stretch yourself and learn as well. And for me, podcasting and podcasts are what I, when I'm riding my bike, when I'm doing dishes, when I'm doing housework, when I am playing Switch, or kind of losing myself in a board game or knitting. Podcasts are what keep me company. And I think that ultimately, that's what we get to do is kind of be there for people and bring them conversations, entertainment, company, which is why we saw podcasting, consumption increase and not decrease even during something like a pandemic. So that's all to say that, it was a lot of pressure to put on a little kid. And, I'm politically active in other ways, but I get to spend my days now helping other creators make a living by, creating a community online. And I think people know that sort of money makes the world go round, even in entertainment, which is what makes a sort of product that is inherently free, like podcasting, I think feel really meaningful. Like there are thousands, hundreds of thousands of people out there making community, running forums, doing fan works, running exchanges, making podcasts and videos and fan edits for free. and because of the love of it. And that is what makes those bonds so valuable.
During Amanda's podcast journey, she realized her value could also be found in uplifting the voices of those who may not have had a chance to be heard otherwise. Her value escalated when she elevated the value of those around her.
All those people are, own their own IP. They own their own shows. They make their own decisions. They are not ultimately answering to, a boss or network notes at the end of the day. If their podcast is successful, or really profitable, depending on how you define success, of course, those aren't synonyms. They alone get to benefit from that. And I think it is much more ethical, sustainable, exciting to help others flourish and succeed with them than to sort of succeed on their behalf or to, use their good ideas or their labor to profit at the end of the day. And that, unfortunately, is how a lot of other companies in podcasting are structured, where they have to churn out either a huge volume of shows or only take bets on people who have existing kind of proven audiences. That's why you see every celebrity you can imagine sort of has a podcast now, or it seems like it, or people who should not necessarily have, a huge platform or a huge voice or don't need those resources are too often the ones getting it. And so instead we try to focus on, how can you make a success by your own terms? How can your show, your business be sustainable how you need it and not by somebody else's definition of success, to really stand out here and be good for you. Someone else's dream doesn't have to be yours. And it's a difficult message to kind of unlearn under capitalism, but it's something that I know other people really get and the community really gets. Consumers are really savvy. Fans know that art costs money. People know that they have to, support creators if they can to keep the art that they really enjoy happen, make that happening.
That's amazing. And it must feel really great across the board to be able to put that out into the world and know that you are lifting these voices that maybe otherwise wouldn't get heard, because the world is oversaturated with folks who have already been given an opportunity and now they're given more and more and more and more when there are other voices that are itching to be out there and itching to be heard.
The beautiful thing is I get to a lot of the time, when my days go really right and my weeks feel really good, I get to kind of sit back and watch all these creators do an incredible job. And so often, like, all they need is one person saying, you realize you deserve to make a living with this project, right? Like, you realize that it's okay to say to your community, hey, if you can, here's an opportunity to support me financially, or, hey, this is what's going on with me. And if you want to help me level up, this is how. It really doesn't take a lot. And people just need that little bit of permission or encouragement to say, you know what, I do have a unique voice. I do have a good perspective. I am doing something worthwhile here. Listening to the voices telling you you're doing something great and you deserve to double down on it, is a lot harder sometimes than listening to the dissenting voices, whether they're external or internal.
While unlocking the value of other people through Multitude, Amanda showed the value of Multitude as a whole. People saw the dedication to craft and execution and bought in, and this strengthened the creator to audience relationship.
You take on much more of an empowerment role for the people within your company. Is it fair to say perhaps that helping other creators, helping other podcasters to find their own value and their own meaning is perhaps what your true calling was all along? Is that where you find your own value?
I do. I really think of myself as a creative midwife. I find a lot of satisfaction in helping other people's projects get born. And this is totally a group project. It is not just me doing this. Multitude was started in 2018, and about 6 months in, both myself and our head of creative, Eric Silver, went full time doing this when our day jobs were getting unsustainable, and we had kind of our first consulting contract to be able to say, okay, like, we can help somebody else make a podcast, market a podcast, put it out there in the world. We know we have a little bit of income coming in for the next 6 months. That's enough of a runway to figure out what's next. And so, we didn't get the chance to launch with an office, a staff of 20, a huge investment. But I see that as a huge benefit because we didn't have to answer to anybody but ourselves. We made choices because we thought it was the right fit for us and our colleagues and our collective, and not because, a board or an investor was telling us, well, you really have to, 10x your growth this year in order to, hit these benchmarks. So it was slow. slow. It was annoying. I spent a lot of nights like getting not enough sleep as I should have been getting in my mid-20s as we were, putting out podcasts for years next to our day jobs. But what that means is, we get to own all of our decisions.
It sounds like membership was a really obvious decision in some ways for you and your team. You can operate in such a way where you're not beholden to sponsors or advertisers who might have their own agendas to push. It feels like, membership was the right decision for you looking back. But how did you originally decide to use membership as a way to monetize? How did you start to build your membership community?
Fellow podcasters ask me all the time, what level do I have to get to? How big do I have to be? How many episodes do I have to publish before I get to launch a membership? And my answer is, there's no standard. You should have one unless there's a really good reason for you not to. Because if you make a difference, even to one person, and that person wants to show you and how much you mean to them by way of giving you some money, let them. Don't stand in your own way. Even if you have an audience of one, if you mean something to that person and that person can contribute financially, they will. And so long before sponsors see your value, long before other partners can make money with you, your audience wants to show you your value. And it's such a good fit. During the pandemic, we saw our membership revenue increase, even as all of our sponsors canceled because companies were kind of putting their marketing budgets on freeze. People get it. This is not, 2010 where selling out is sort of the main theme of the internet discourse, right? Like people get it. They're savvy. They understand that it costs money to make stuff. And early on our podcasts, between Spirits, the first mythology show I started, and Join the Party, our actual play podcast, that plays Dungeons and Dragons and Monster of the Week, people were saying, this is amazing. Like, I never thought I would see this aspect of my experience or hear these stories or, get all these jokes in a way that I thought only existed in my own head outside in someone else's world as well. And, it's not all altruistic. Like, it's also letting them connect with one another, and make friends and find community. Podcasting is so unusual in that there is no comment section, right? There's no algorithm. There is no kind of one platform. And while a lot of companies say that that's a problem that they want to sort of use your investment dollars to solve, it is a great benefit for podcasting how kind of low tech we are, because it really means that when someone is in your audience and once you've done the very hard work of finding somebody and convincing them to go through like 5 different steps and 2 different apps to listen to your dang podcast, it is like they're really there for the long haul. They're so dedicated. Nobody is bought in like podcast listeners are bought in. And so membership is the answer that makes the absolute most sense. Ads are so valuable. Merch is great. Live shows are so fun. There are so many ways that you can, make money and diversify your income as a podcast creator. But ultimately, the heart of it is audience, and membership is the absolute best fit for that.
Now, Multitude is known for its community and connection through podcasting because they took the time to build those deep relationships.
That is exactly what gives our business value, right? Like, nobody is coming around kind of trying to acquire Multitude because of our underlying assets, right? We don't own the IP of any of our shows, okay? We don't have like terrible exclusive exploitative contracts with our shows or our hosts. We don't, have a bunch of user data that we're eager to sell. We have the thing that lots of small businesses all around the world have, which is a clear mission, a community of customers, and like a mutual expectation of trust where like we're going to show up every week and give you exactly what you asked for. In hundreds and hundreds of episodes over 5-6 years, our shows have never missed an episode. Like, we don't disappoint our listeners. We come through. We're there when we say we're going to be there. We deliver on what we say we're going to deliver, and they do the same for us. And it's, an ongoing kind of dance of mutual respect where nobody's exploiting each other when it comes to our employees, our hosts, our clients, our audience. And that makes, the sort of voluntary nature of showing up every week because we enjoy what one another is bringing and doing. That makes that so much more meaningful. And it's something that I wish I saw in more of the industry, where, among entertainment companies, among, media and tech conglomerates, as those two things inch closer and closer together, among other people making entertainment, creator economy, and podcasting, so often They are trying to play at scale. They're trying to win. They are trying to, lock employees down, bust union efforts, pay people as little as possible. And that's just not a long-term solution. You might win for the moment, but you are not going to win long-term. And ultimately having a word that means something, having an audience that believes in you, and knowing exactly what your value is and what makes you different to others out there is so much more valuable. We're going to teach you how to play the game. We're going to focus on the story. We're not going to have weird or gross or off-putting humor. And we are going to teach you what you have to know to enjoy the story and come along with us. And you know what? It's built the most incredible community of people who share our values. And whether it's, using your social media feeds or your show to model the kind of tone and engagement and audience you want, the beautiful thing is then you attract people who share those values and who want that same thing. And so right now in the Join the Party Discord, there are people pet sitting for each other, making online role-playing groups. Someone just offered to photograph someone else's wedding. It is truly the most incredible and generous community. People have made real friendships there. And it's because, we set the tone for our own party. We tell you what we're looking for, and the people who get it, and they come on. And it's hard work and it is slow growth, but you know what? It is really sustainable, because when someone finds a space where they think, oh my God, am I dreaming? Or is this space so truly for me? They're not going to give it up easily.
Definitely. So, getting a little bit back to the business side of things, talk to us about, the business process of getting or creating new shows. And you talked a little bit about this, but how do you help those shows unlock their value through Multitude?
Absolutely. We really think of ourselves as a toolkit for creators, where imagine if you had an office and no one ever bothered you or took you into a meeting that could have been an email, or made you do a project that didn't make sense for your job. But when you needed help, when you wanted someone to talk to, when you're like, has anyone else dealt with this? You kind of turn to a colleague and ask that question and have that space and that ability. That's really what we want to do. And so we do things like, have an extensive kind of onboarding pre-production meeting where either when a show joins the collective or we start a new show with somebody who is already one of our hosts, we start with questions like, what do you want to accomplish with this? What does success look like for you? It doesn't have to be a lot of money. It doesn't even have to be a huge audience. If your goal is something more specific or something more focused, maybe it is make money and have a big audience. That's great. But we always start with defining what success means for them, because success for us is helping our creators see their goals and making enough money to pay our staff fairly along the way. It really is that simple. So we say, what do you hate? What do you like? What do you want to do as far as the production of the show? What can we take off your hands? And then our goal is really to be available for them, but not be essential to their day-to-day operation going forward. So for some of the shows, we provide editing services and get to pay an excellent editor a fair wage, which is great. For others, we simply meet once a month and say, what's coming up for you? How can we support you? What do you need? And that is the kind of thing I wish existed when we were coming up, where, in 2015 and 16, growing a podcast, it kind of felt like the only goals ultimately were to sell the show to a big network, or at least sign to a big network, because that means growth, right? Or use this as a sort of portfolio to get a full-time job making a podcast for someone else. I'm really glad neither of those things worked out, because now, we get to do this for ourselves and do kind of my dream job of being that creative midwife and coach almost for other podcasters.
While Amanda has focused on unlocking the value of Multitude's podcasters, Blair's love of quilting led her to focus on helping others find joy in their own quilting journey.
Today, we're joined by Blair Stocker, founder of Wisecraft Handmade, which started by turning meaningful fabric into modern patchwork, and is now a home for education in quilting and sewing. Thank you so much for joining us today, Blair. Hope you're keeping well today.
I am. Thank you for having me.
From a young age, Blair was always interested in textiles and clothing. This led her to pursuing a career in fashion design, which she decided to step away from while pregnant with her first baby. Her time off had her contemplating the waste of fast fashion, and ultimately, she never went back.
We read that your journey started as a 12-year-old with strep throat, and you picked up a magazine, and there was a light bulb moment that set you on your way towards being a clothing designer, or kind of started that journey. Perhaps you could elaborate on that experience as a 12-year-old.
Yeah. First of all, having strep throat was pretty awful, but, it was interesting that I picked up Vogue magazine, and I don't know why. I think it was probably like something that my mom brought home from work or something like that. And it was so different and just amazing than anything I'd ever seen, than anything in my little life in North Carolina was. And I should also say that I grew up in North Carolina in the middle of a very robust time for the textile industry. So that sort of helped my interest in textiles. But I became obsessed with clothes and had no idea what kind of career trajectory that would make for me, but knew that that was what I was excited about, and that's what I wanted to pursue. Yeah, so I went from college. My college roommate called me after graduation and said, so there's this clothing company that's here, and they need people to, they're looking to hire people to do various things. And I figured out that it was a French design company that was bought by a local corporation that owned like Wrangler jeans, Lee jeans, and all of that. Meritie and Francois Gerbeau, who were very, very popular in that era, which was probably late 80s, early 90s, mid 90s. And so I took a job. My job was measuring how much shrinkage denim fabric would have if a consumer washed it at home. So I would measure a little spot of denim. I would take it home to my washing machine, and I would wash it and dry it like a consumer would. I'd bring it back to the office, and I would measure it again in the same spot, and I would record my information.
Let's talk a little bit about that transition moving from clothing to quilting. And presumably there are overlaps between the two industries, between clothing and quilting. Can you maybe share a little bit about what you learned working in the clothing industry that is now applicable to the work you do nowadays?
I worked at Gerbeau. I worked up the ranks until I was more of a design person for the women's division and the men's division. I left there and went to Burlington Industries and designed knit fabric. My job was to come up with different yarn dyed patterns and stripes and things using this brand new fiber that they had called Tencel. And then from there, I was hired to work on the design of a division of Nautica. So that took me for North Carolina to Seattle, Washington. I did that for 2 years. And I had gotten married. I met my husband at Gerbeau, and we got married. We moved to Seattle, and decided when I was expecting our daughter, who's now 23, that I would probably just stay home because the types of positions I had in apparel were very demanding as far as travel. I would, go to Hong Kong and end up having to stay there for 3 weeks to watch samples come out of the sample line and things like that. So we thought, you know what, let's just give it a try. We were in Seattle with no family. So I just stayed home with my daughter after she was born. And being away from the industry, I was able to sort of look back at the waste that we have in fast fashion and things like that. And it's funny how when you're away from it and you're just, my world was so small with my daughter, I was like, I still want to do something, but I don't want to contribute to that anymore. But at the same time, it's like I also learned about like really nice quality fabric and what that meant and what that looked like and what a difference it made when I sewed with it and things like that.
When Blair started making a quilt, she had no idea what she was doing. She did it to save all of the beautiful baby clothes that she had been gifted and ended up loving the process. She eventually formed a quilting community through blogging and then wrote a book. She found her value through her quilt making passion and was able to share that with others.
I never made clothes for myself. And I always joke that, we had really amazing sample sewers in the apparel industry, and I could never compete with that. So I always felt like I was measuring my own work, making a garment with what the amazing things that they could do. I was always joking. I'm like, I make one sleeve. You want another one, just like the first one. And so, yes, I had never made a quilt. Nobody in my family made a quilt before. Didn't grow up with quilts. But I think that the catalyst for that first quilt was being in the apparel industry. My daughter was gifted the most beautiful clothes as a baby that I just was in love with. I was kind of sad that she grew out of them so quickly. And we knew that our second child, when we were expecting our second child, my son, we knew that he was a boy. So I knew that I wasn't going to have a need for a lot of these little dresses and things. And so my thought was a patchwork quilt is kind of like, it's kind of like scrapbooking, but with fabric, I guess. It's like, I love fabric and I have memories and lots of things in my memory bank is triggered by fabric, the smell of old fabric or the floral of a curtain or something like that. So I kind of wanted that for Emma, my daughter. And so I just, as hard as it was, I cut all those really cute little clothes up into squares. I had no idea what I was doing. It was, I had my dining room table and every night I would get out these little squares. I had no idea any of quilting rules, it needs to be a 1/4 inch seam, or I was making everything like with these huge seam allowances because that's what we did in apparel, and I didn't know that you couldn't sew a knit to a woven fabric because the knit has stretch and the woven, I sewed all that together. So I honestly think that probably made it a better project because I really didn't know what I didn't know. I just jumped in and made this quilt.
Let's kind of progress the journey a little bit now, Blair. You're getting involved in quilting. You've started on this journey. You're starting to get interested in kind of quilting, patchwork. Around this time, blogging is becoming popular. And Lord knows plenty of people kind of dipped their toes into blogging in the early days, including yourself, if only to use it as a way to kind of document your time with your children, document your experiences of teaching them how to quilt. But ultimately, in your case, this kind of dip your toes in of a blogging experience set you on the road to a book deal. And that's a hell of a journey. So perhaps you could share a little bit about your experiences moving from, should we say, like a hobby blogger all the way through to an author. How did that come about?
Yeah, I started blogging in 2004, 2005. And I think there were just maybe 12 of us creative, like doing that sort of sewing and things like that. It was a very different online world. So it was sort of a way just to document the things that I did, document things I did with my kids, and just a fun way to like look back and see, the things that I had made. They were all sort of there together. I made a lot of good connections and formed a lot of good friendships with friends online that I am still friends with today because of that time when all of our kids were really young. And because I was no longer working, I kind of, I wasn't bringing in a salary anymore. Our household income had sort of changed and been reduced. So I was having a lot of fun taking things from the thrift store and redoing them, whether it be furniture or anything like that. And I would document that on my blog in addition to sewing and making quilts. And I was approached by thrift stores, basically, and they hired me to shop their store and find things in their store that I could turn into DIY projects for content for their blog or their website. So that's kind of how everything started. I did that for about 3 years for them. We did Halloween, which is a huge event or season for all thrift stores. But we would do a Halloween party with DIY projects. We did, a holiday party, summer party, things like that. So, and I always sewed something to go in those little settings that we did. And so at some point I had this huge body of all of these DIY projects, and we pitched it to publishers as an idea for a book. And so it wasn't one of those fairy tale stories of a publisher coming to me and saying, "Oh, we want you to write a book for us." It was way different than that. I had to pitch to them and sort of sell myself to them. And we finally did get a book deal with the content that I had done for the Savers chain. And so the way that first book was done, it was divided into 4 seasons because that's the way I looked at creative color stories and things like that in the apparel industry into seasons. So I said, why don't we make it 4 seasons of projects? And in each season, there's like a very specific color story. There's specific projects for the season, and there's a quilt in every season. It ends with every season. So that was my first book, and it just sort of started from there. It's funny. It's like when you put a lot of your personal work in a gathered online space, like a portfolio or like a blog or something, you suddenly see that you have an aesthetic. You see that you have a lot of things. They're not just scattered all over your house, and you actually have these nice photos of them. So that's sort of how that started.
Membership actually helped Blair unlock her value further. She knew she was passionate about quilting and saw that same passion in other people. So she pivoted to membership to dive in deeper with her community.
I enjoy teaching quilting to other people. And it's taken a long time to figure out what my specific focus was. I still love scrappy quilts, just like that first quilt that I made for my daughter. I still love that look. And I have realized over the years that I have a point of view and a perspective as far as color and things like that I can help other people with. And so I've started making patterns. In 2017, I actually invented a quilting ruler that is a viewfinder that you can look at color value with. So you can take a lot of scraps, and using my ruler, which I called the Ruby ruler because it's based off of Rubylith film that photographers and landscape painters used to use way back when to look at their value forms on their composition. And you can take that ruler as a quilter and you can look at a bunch of scraps on your work table, and you can decide which are light, medium, and dark value. And you can create design elements in your scrappy quilts. They don't have to be just, one scrap here, one scrap there with no rhyme or reason. So I love teaching that, and realized that there was a need from people that appreciated my work to learn more about that. And so I tried a couple different things, as far as online classes, as far as, YouTube videos and things like that. And honestly, I've had a desire for probably 2 years to create a membership where I could put out content that they need when they need it, and respond to them. And also as a content creator, which, I was talking to somebody the other day about this. It's like, if we're online, no matter what we do, whether we're a painter or a quilter or whatever, we're a content creator. There's only so much that content that I can create for free and feel like it's worth it. And I feel like that my audience appreciates the quality of content behind a membership. They feel like I'm bringing more, and I am bringing more. I mean, I'm doing a live Q&A with them this afternoon to answer specific questions so I can respond to them. But I think the main thing for me is I didn't want to just create free content anymore. I felt like I could certainly do that. And I did it for a long time, but what if I could just make it organized and responsive to people who really wanted to know what it was, rather than just putting it out there and hoping the right person sees it.
Quilting holds so much meaning to Blair. It helps her with her stress, her healing, and more. She is lucky enough to be able to share that meaning with her community in a positive and productive way, and they value her for that.
I can look at any quilt that I've made in the past and remember like the music that I was playing when I was making that quilt. Or, I listened to now I'll have like the Jeffrey Dahmer quilt or something like that. You know what I mean? From watching like true crime shows or something. But there's I enjoy the process of making a quilt so much. And I want other people to enjoy that too. And I think that quilters put a lot of pressure on themselves, as I said earlier, to make like the perfect quilt or make it the perfect construction or all the points line up and things like that. And there's so much to be learned from making any quilt that I think is so interesting, like playing with the ruler or, it doesn't have to necessarily, like a quilt can mean something with the fabrics, but it can also mean something with just the process of making a quilt. It can be healing. It can be meditative. I do a lot of hand stitching on quilts these days, and I teach that it actually lowers your stress level. It can sort of create a rhythm with your breathing. So there's all these aspects of quilt making that make it meaningful, in addition to what you put in the quilt. And I feel like it's so important. These people have bought into what I'm going to show them and teach them, and I want to honor that and get to know them. I actually, for the founding member launch, which is what this was in September, I actually, I created numbers and said, if I can't meet these numbers, this is not going to be worthwhile, because I am going to have to invest, a lot of time into this membership. And so when I felt like I wasn't meeting the numbers right away, I would jump on YouTube. I would jump on Instagram. Let me answer your questions about the membership. Like what are your questions? What are your hesitations? So we did that. And then when I closed the membership, I really wanted to thank these members. And so I actually sent them all a tiny little gift just to say, thank you for being a founding member. It wasn't a lot, but I just felt like I wanted to do something because these people have bought into this for me. And I'm thrilled. I'm thrilled people want to give me money for me to tell them what I know.
Both Amanda and Blair set up sustainable businesses through unlocking their value, finding something they love and sharing it with the world. Their passion shines through and people believe in what they are doing. We believe that knowing your value increases everyone's satisfaction. When you strongly believe in what you are putting into the world, others will too.
I'm Si.
I'm Jen.
And this is Creative Independence, a podcast by Memberful.
Thank you to Amanda McLaughlin and Blair Stalker for joining us today. You can find Amanda at multitude.productions, and you can find Blair at wisecrafthandmade.com. Thank you so much for listening. Be sure to leave us a review, and we'll catch you next time.